So I want to start off with a question for all of you. Put up your hand if there's something big in your life that you've been wanting to do, but for some reason you haven't done it yet. Come on. Now keep your hand up if people have told you that your idea is crazy and impossible. I'm asking you this today because I want to challenge your definition of what's crazy and impossible. My name is Stephanie Case, and I'm a lawyer. I specialize in human rights and humanitarian emergencies, which has taken me to some of the most difficult places on earth. But outside of my professional life, I am an ultrarunner, which means that I like to run distances longer than a marathon. Whether in the jungle or in the snow or the desert, the longer and the tougher the trail, the better. A couple of years ago, I combined these two passions to create a charity called Free to Run, which is an organization that provides sports opportunities for women and girls who've been affected by conflict in places like Afghanistan. Now, the things that I'm most proud about in life have started out as crazy and impossible ideas, and I want to tell you about two of those experiences today. Two unlikely success stories about some of the toughest ultramarathons in the world. The first is about Nilofar and Zainab. They're two women from Afghanistan who wanted to become the first people from their country to finish an ultramarathon. They signed up for the Four Deserts Gobi March, which is a 250-kilometer ultramarathon through the Gobi Desert. It goes over 6 stages, so you do about a marathon a day and then a double on day 5. And it gets worse, you carry about 20 pounds of gear on your back. So you're carrying your food, your clothes, your sleeping bag, everything you need. Now, these women, they hadn't run more than a couple of kilometers before outside, let alone a marathon or an ultramarathon. So that's where Free to Run came in. To train for this kind of a race in any country is difficult, but to train as women in Afghanistan, it's near impossible. In order to train, they had to get permission from the police to be able to train in a local park. They needed male chaperones to be able to go out in the mountains on the weekend. And they had to have private transport to get to and from their training, because if they went on the street, they would be harassed and sometimes people would throw stones at them. I don't think anyone actually thought they were going to make it to the race, let alone finish the race. They had just 6 months to get ready. It's not that anyone doubted their intentions, but what they were trying to do really did seem impossible. Well, they showed up on the start line, and they were convinced they were not only going to finish, they were going to win. It's called managing expectations. It didn't take long before reality set in. The pain, the fatigue, the blisters, and the weather didn't help. On the second day, we got hit by a snowstorm, which is not something anyone's expecting in the desert. And no matter how tough the conditions were, though, they stopped to pray 5 times a day, Shia and Sunni, side by side. Well, let me tell you, by the 5th day, even I was praying. It was the long stage, the 80-kilometer stage, and we were walking at a pace of 3 kilometers an hour, which meant that it was going to take us 24 hours to finish. This was my face when Nilofar decided she was going to stop drinking water. It was 50 degrees Celsius, and dehydration was a massive concern. We walked all day and into the night. And when we finally got to the 220-kilometer mark of the whole race, Zainab decides she's going to quit. She sat down at the checkpoint and took off her running shoes. We couldn't believe it, and nothing we said could make her get going again. And at that point, I thought, this was crazy and impossible. I don't think she's going to make it, and I gave up on her. But no sooner had I given up did she put her running shoes back on, she got up, and she walked out of the tent into the night. We walked straight through until sunrise, and this was the moment when Zainab could see the end, and she knew that she was going to finish. Nilafar and Zainab made history as the first team from Afghanistan to complete an ultramarathon. It truly, yeah. It really was incredible, and it taught me that even I wasn't dreaming big enough, that maybe there was more that was possible out there. So I took that experience into the biggest challenge of my own life, which happened just a few weeks ago. Tour de Géant. It gets worse. This is a 338-kilometer non-stop race through Aosta Valley in Italy. Competitors have 150 hours to finish, which seems like a lot, but not when you consider the amount of climbing you have to do. You have to do 24,000 meters of climbing, which is the equivalent of going from sea level to the top of Everest and back down 2.5 times. Yeah. Training for this kind of a race takes years, not months. And in the years leading up to the race, I'd been living in areas of active conflict. In 2012, I was living in an armed compound in Afghanistan, where I would do loops around the compound. Walking, let alone running outside, was strictly forbidden. And as I was doing my loops, I could hear gunfire, sometimes explosions outside. In 2014, I was living in a tent in South Sudan, in a site for internally displaced people. And the physical and mental stresses were so extreme that I struggled to even get outside of my tent in the morning to have a bucket shower, let alone run 50 kilometers through the bush. And in the 2 years leading up to the race, I was living in Gaza, where again, I wasn't allowed to go outside. I had one advantage in Gaza, though, over the other 2 places, and that was a really amazing training partner, Tyrone. This is Tyrone the tire. And we would do loops together inside the parking lot of the UN compound for hours. Yeah. And when Tyrone got tired, I would go inside on the treadmill, where often I would impale myself on the front of the console when the electricity frequently cut out. So needless to say, my training was abysmal. I really had no business being on that starting line. I got to the race, and I had no idea how it was going to turn out. I didn't know if I was going to finish. I didn't even know what day I was going to finish on. But I knew that I was going to leave everything out on the trail. Well, I ended up leaving a lot more on the trail than I was expecting because I was throwing up for the first 30 kilometers. I couldn't keep anything down. If I had to chew anything, I would immediately start dry heaving. So in order to get the calories in, I ended up drinking cups of olive oil and eating whipped cream. Yeah, it's not as fun as it sounds. And beyond the nausea was the sleep deprivation. I was pushing myself so hard that I just didn't want to waste any time sleeping. So I went the first 175 kilometers without taking a nap. And even at that point, I only slept for 80 minutes. This is what I like to call my tour face. I did everything to try to get through. I dealt with hallucinations, I dreamt up imaginary friends, I sang songs, I took song requests from the animals. I mean, I was a complete mess. There was one moment I was standing in a valley in the middle of the night, and I had no idea which mountain I had just come down. But I made it to the final ascent, something I'd been thinking about for days. And I thought I was home free until it started snowing. And as the ice built up on my shoulders, I knew that if I stopped even for more than a few seconds, I could fall asleep and fall off the mountain. So I ended up peeing myself as I was doing that last ascent. It wasn't really the glorious finish moment I was thinking of. But in the end, I finished. And you know, I not only finished, I finished in second place female. I was second place female and 14th overall out of 750 starters. I ran for, yeah, thank you. I ran for 98 hours and 15 minutes straight with just 2.5 hours of sleep. It was insane. I actually still don't know how it happened. Nothing about it really made sense. But it taught me that we actually have no idea what we are capable of until we try. And these barriers, these limitations that we put on ourselves, they're really in our mind. Once we reconceptualize this notion of crazy and impossible, then the opportunities are really limitless. So I want to bring you back to that question that I asked you at the beginning, that big thing that you want to do. Well, maybe it's time for you. Maybe it's time for you to redefine what's possible in your own life and dare to be a bit crazy. Maybe it's time for you to do that big thing and follow the illogical path to success. Thank you.